Shana Tova, Hag Sameach. It's wonderful to see everybody and to welcome you to Women of Washington Hebrew Congregation's Literary Club. I'm excited to be with you this month to be able to share. Really excited as well to welcome this month's speaker. I know I'm spotlighted right now. You can also, if you want to see everybody else, you can go to gallery view. I will be bringing our speaker up in just a moment, but I'm going to take a few moments to introduce her. So thank you to Mara Brick and Bonnie Young and Tab, as always, for being wonderful partners and thinking about bringing in meaningful topics and engaging books, and certainly fantastic authors as we have today. And a reminder that you can purchase Lisa's book either through the WHC Mitzvah Mall or through a local bookseller. I'm going to put the link in the chat shortly. But I do want to welcome back to Washington Hebrew. This is so exciting. Welcome back to Washington Hebrew, Lisa Barr, who has been with us before and is so fantastic. So we're thrilled to have you back. I know you heard a few people spoke about the fact that they couldn't put your book down. We get these boxes from the Jewish Book Council that are filled with books of authors who are going to speak. And before we even had gone to the conference, which is virtual now, I had actually grabbed Lisa's book because we've had her before, and I know what an engaging author she is. So I was so excited that we had this opportunity to bring her back to talk about The Goddess of Warsaw. Lisa Barr is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of The Goddess of Warsaw, also of Woman on Fire, The Unbreakables, and the award-winning Fugitive Colors. Lisa served as an editor for the Jerusalem Post, managing editor of Today's Chicago Woman, managing editor of Moment magazine, and as an editor and reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Among the highlights of her career, Lisa covered the famous handshake between the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, the late PLO leader Yasser Arafat, and President Bill Clinton at the White House. Lisa has been featured on Good Morning America and Today for her work as an author and journalist. And actress Sharon Stone has optioned rights to adapt Woman on Fire, her previous book. She spoke with us a year or so ago. She has optioned rights to adapt Woman on Fire for film, which is so exciting. I know that many of you have already read The Goddess of Warsaw. If you didn't, that's okay. You will want to once we're done today. But The Goddess of Warsaw is the harrowing and ultimately triumphant tale of a Jewish World War II assassin turned Hollywood star with a dark secret past during the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. When the famous actress is threatened by someone from her past, she must put her skills into play to protect herself, her illustrious career, and those she loves then and now. It is, I can vouch for this, I know many of you can, it is a gripping page-turner of one of history's most heroic uprisings and a glamorous actress whose personal war never ends. The Goddess of Warsaw is filled with secrets, lies, twists and turns, and a burning pursuit of justice, no matter the cost. But even more so, it is imprinted with Lisa's incredibly engaging writing style and eye for detail and imagination, which we'll get to that and many other questions as well. But I am so delighted to welcome Lisa Barr back, and I'm going to turn it over to her to share. There will be a Q&A opportunity a little bit later, and so I invite you, if you have questions you would like me to pose to Lisa, please send them directly to me in the chat while she's speaking, so that you're not, send it privately so that it's not distracting from what Lisa's going to share with us. And Lisa is pleasantly in Florida, usually in Chicago, but today enjoying the warm weather, which is probably similar to the weather here today. So Lisa, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my God, Rabbi, what an intro. You're so hired. Thank you. So I'm just going to slip on my glasses here. It really is an honor and a thrill to be here with all of you. Truly a celebration of book lovers and books. And thank you again for hosting me. For those who I haven't met before, I'm Lisa Barr. I'm an author, a mom, a wife, and a journalist. I'm also a Chicago girl. I attended Solomon Schechter Day School growing up, which gave me the creative goods at a young age. My teachers taught me the beauty of Judaism, nurtured my love of writing, and encouraged me to always question things and go deeper. I graduated from New Trier High School, University of Illinois, and earned my master's degree at the Medill School of Journalism. Chicago journalism was my boot camp. I began my career right out of college at Margie Korshak Associates Public Relations. So it's a big arts and entertainment agency in Chicago. And I started there as an intern, and they offered me a job. And of course, they gave me the client that no one ever heard of, nobody wanted, and probably none of you have ever heard of it, called Starbucks. So yes, about 100 years ago, I took then CEO Howard Schultz all around to all the radio stations to introduce this new coffee experience. I then worked for political news commentator Joel Wiseman as his researcher for 2 years at WGN TV in Chicago. Joel taught me to never take no for an answer, and he was definitely one of the inspirations for my crusty journalist character, Dan Manning, in my novel, Woman on Fire. If you read it, you'll meet Dan Manning and you will know that this guy was based on Joel. I then went on to become the managing editor of Today's Chicago Woman for a couple years. And I also had my own column interviewing Chicago legends. And one of my favorite interviews was advice columnist Ann Landers. And we actually did the interview for the magazine in her giant closet, literally inside the closet. But that's another story. Then at age 28, I decided I needed a real change. I had just gotten out of a long relationship. Everyone was driving me crazy. When am I getting married? And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm out of here. I want adventure. So I moved to Jerusalem with just my bike, 2 bags, and a computer. I became a reporter and an editor of a weekend section of the Jerusalem Post called In Jerusalem for the next 5 years. And it was, hands down, the best job of my career. I covered everything from interviewing presidents and prime ministers and celebrities, from Madonna to Robert De Niro to Sting to Guns N' Roses to covering terrorism, which, as you know, was not an easy gig. In the early 90s, there was a slew of bus bombings in Jerusalem. And one of my hardest assignments, because it was even though the newspaper is a big name, it was a small newspaper. We were all doing everything. So while I was an editor and a reporter, one of my hardest assignments was covering the hospital waiting rooms. This was those who were waiting to hear if their loved ones were dead or alive after a bus bombing or a terror attack. And you can imagine what it was like shoving a microphone under someone's nose in that moment. It was very hard work and at times devastating. And many nights I would cry myself to sleep. One particular story was the game changer for me. I was on my way home from Jerusalem to Chicago for a family event, and I stopped in Washington, D.C. to see my best friend. And Rabbi, I don't know if you know her, but it's Lisa Eisen. And anyway, then I got a call. I know you're on vacation. It was my editor. I know you're on vacation, but can you be at the White House tomorrow morning? It's top secret. And I was like, hell yeah. And there I was, one of 3 reporters from the Jerusalem Post covering the famous handshake between President Bill Clinton, the late Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, and PLO leader Yasser Arafat. If only the peace accords came to fruition back then, right? Well, it was exhilarating covering that piece of history. And then we all know what happened. The peace process went south. Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. I quickly cut my vacation short, returned to Israel. I then interviewed the Prime Minister's wife, Leah Rabin, in an exclusive interview for Vogue magazine just a few weeks or maybe less after the assassination. I have never been so nervous for an interview. I had butterflies, my heart was in my stomach as I took that elevator up to the Rabin's apartment in Tel Aviv. I spent 4 hours interviewing Mrs. Rabin, and she was this stoic woman mothering an entire nation whose dreams of peace had been quashed, whose husband of 47 years, an Israeli hero, was murdered. As the interview went on, I said to her, Mrs. Rabin, when you go to bed at night and it's just you now, is he proud of you, how you are handling all of this without him by your side? And her face dropped and she began to cry. And she cried, I cried, and we held each other for a long time. And we remained friends from that day until her passing. That story for me remains to this day one of my most meaningful pieces. From Jerusalem, I moved to Washington, D.C. in 1999. I went on to become the managing editor of Moment magazine, which was founded by Nobel Peace Prize winner Elie Wiesel. I then moved back to Chicago a few years later and served as an editor and reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times, where I launched the paper's first women's section called Lifestyles. But why am I telling you all of this? Because my background as a journalist informs my work as an author. Because most of my adult life, I was a working journalist by day, and at night, I worked on my fiction. Now, happily, those tables are turned. But every one of my books has a news hook to the story. And I always say, you can take the girl out of journalism, but never the journalism out of the girl. My years as an investigative reporter in the United States and abroad served me well as an author of historical suspense, especially when it comes to research, knowing exactly how, when, and where to deep dive, and of course, mastering the fine art of hooking the reader and leaving you with cliffhangers. Timing is everything as an author and a journalist. And a little secret, I like to infuse something of my own experiences into each book that I write. For example, when I was 17 years old, I was on an internship program in Springfield, Illinois, which was our state capital, and it was for a semester during high school. I was approached at that time by a special law enforcement unit, and they asked, would I be willing to be used as bait to lure and help break a sex trafficking ring? Hello, of course I said yes. And this is pre-cell phones. So this was done in real time. And in those days, you didn't need a parent to sign off on anything. So I took the assignment, and very soon after, criminals were arrested, and we broke this sex trafficking ring, which included politicians. You can imagine what that was like for a teenager. It was pivotal. I knew then I was going to have a career as a journalist and later as an author, seeking out the tough stories and doing whatever it took to expose the truth, as well as find those against all odds moments in history and tackle them. This backstory shows up in Woman on Fire. I gave my story to my young journalist as her story. So history meets passion, meets suspense, meets art, meets strong, fiery women. That's my jam. All of my stories are different, but there are themes that thread all of my books. I always ask this question in all my novels. How far would you go for your passion? Would you kill for it, steal for it, or fight for it, even if the price tag is your own life? Like Lena Browning, born Bina Blonsky, the fearless and fiery heroine and the goddess of Warsaw. All of my novels have an art theme. My debut novel, Fugitive Colors, is about 3 young artists in Paris on the eve of World War II and what happens to them when the war gets in the way of their friendship and their art. The Unbreakables, my second novel, is probably the most different from all of my other works, but it's about a woman, a mother, a sculptor who loses everything due to the Ashley Madison scandal. And for those of you who don't know what Ashley Madison is, it's a website for married cheaters whose motto was, "Life is short, have an affair." And this is for real. It was hacked in 2015 and 32 million cheaters were exposed. So I use that as the backdrop to the book. My protagonist, Sophie Bloom, flees from Chicago to the south of France after her life falls apart. And there she rediscovers her joie de vivre, a lust for life, love, passion, and of course, art. And yes, it's racy, so I always recommend red wine while reading that book. And of course, there's Woman on Fire, the book that made me a New York Times bestseller. It's a gripping tale of a young journalist who gets embroiled in a major international art scandal centered around a Nazi-looted masterpiece. And now, my newest book, baby, The Goddess of Warsaw. I have it and all my books here with me, The Goddess of Warsaw. This was the book that I was meant to write. It is truly a culmination of all my work. It is an actress turned assassin turned avenger. This story burned inside me. I always say the story that keeps you up at night is the one you have to write, must go after no matter what. As a daughter of a Holocaust survivor from Poland, this book is deeply personal. As the rabbi explained, The Goddess of Warsaw is a harrowing and ultimately triumphant tale of a Jewish World War II assassin turned Hollywood star whose personal war never ends. The historical backdrop in the book is the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, considered the most important Jewish revolt in World War II history, told through the eyes of a fierce young woman who survives the war using her brains, her beauty, and her acting abilities, serving at first as a smuggler and then an assassin for the Jewish resistance. After the war, our fearless heroine becomes one of the most famous actresses of our time. Picture Lauren Bacall, born Betty Joan Persky from the Bronx. That was my inspiration for Lena Browning in the book, a femme fatale who never forgets the lessons of her past. As a side note, while doing my research, I discovered that Lauren Bacall and the late Prime Minister of Israel, Shimon Peres, were actually first cousins. And I love discovering unknown historical nuggets that I had never heard of, like that one. The legendary Lena Browning, born Bina Blonsky, is not only glamorous, she is lethal, utilizing her Hollywood sets as the ultimate cover to avenge her loved ones by hunting down those Nazis who escaped justice by hiding out in America, particularly in Hollywood, her turf. Goddess is filled with secrets and lies and twists and turns and a burning pursuit of justice, no matter the cost. That is the heart of the story. As I set out to research this book, several questions emerged for me. What is the fine line between the pursuit of justice and the hunt for revenge? And what is the price tag for survival? And ultimately, as I wrote this novel, I thought to myself, How do I capture Jewish history's darkest chapter and create a page turner with a Hollywood twist? Most interesting, but as you can imagine, personally difficult, who would have thought that a story I began writing and researching nearly 3 years ago, discussing a historical event that took place 81 years ago, would be eerily relevant in today's world and very difficult political climate. It means the world to me that as a proud Jewish author, to be able to tour with this book depicting one of the most important and pivotal tales of Jewish resistance right now. Lena Browning is my kind of girl, a woman from the past and a woman of our times. She's unapologetic and deliciously fearless. And I kind of fell in love with her as I wrote her. And strangely, when I encountered difficult times since October 7th as a Jewish author, I would think to myself, what would Bina Blonsky, Lena Browning do? So yes, I actually look to my own character for my own inspiration. Lena Browning is the leading lady of her own life. She calls the shots in war. She calls the shots in Hollywood from the first page, first line, down to her very last act. Here's a short quote from the book that defines the goddess of Warsaw and defines Lena Browning in her own words. I have spent my life as an actress. It is the only way I could breathe. Like you, I kept my past hidden from everyone, but on the side, I did what I had to do, serving justice while the world looked the other way. It is the only thing that has given my life meaning. The war is long over, but not for me, never for me. So here's the takeaway if you've read my body of work or you're about to start. Writing the wrongs of history, that's what my books are about, what my characters are about, what I am about. It's all about seeking the truth and not giving up, a fight to the finish line. I gravitate toward this in both real life and my book life, especially empowered women faced with survival scenarios with a choice, sink or swim. I choose swim, and so do my characters. I choose rising instead of falling, but like all of us, like life itself, nothing good comes easy. There are no straight lines, and I always find that the road less traveled is the most interesting, especially for my characters. I love giving readers a little bit of everything. A page turner, complicated relationships, passion and fire, of course, challenges, historical nuggets. But my end game, admittedly, is to keep you up past your bedtime because you have to read just one more chapter. Then I've done my job. My novels, like life, don't end up in a pretty bow, but always, always, my stories will leave you with hope. We all, everyone in this room, has a voice in our heads. For most, it's a parent or a sibling. For me, my goddess, my heroine, will always be my Grandma Rachel, who was my very best friend, a fighter, a Holocaust survivor, who had seen the worst atrocities of mankind, having lost both parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins in Auschwitz, and yet she still believed in love, believed in goodness, laughed with her whole body. Nothing could get in the way of the joy she felt about her family and her legacy and survival. She taught me that. My grandmother's spirit guides my hands, the stories I choose, the words that move me to write, and the reason I fight for what I fight for, standing up to hate and anti-Semitism. As an author and a journalist, I have contributed to numerous anthologies, but I have never been as proud to be part of an anthology excuse me, called On Being Jewish Now. And I don't have it with me because it's in my house in Florida. Otherwise, I'd show it to you. But it came out on October 1st, and it's a compilation of 75 prominent Jewish authors of all genres, edited and compiled by my good friend Zibby Owens. It is our answer as authors to October 7th. As authors, this group is a unified force against surging anti-Semitism, using our words to make a difference and joining hands to navigate these very dark, difficult times. The proceeds will benefit the Artists Against Anti-Semitism, an organization of authors which I helped establish right after October 7th. My personal essay in the book is called Loud and Proud, The Voice in My Head. Of course, it's about my grandmother and her profound impact on my life. I'm sure many of you have heard that since October 7th, many Jewish authors have been blacklisted, canceled, harassed, and review bombed. I have been among those authors hardest hit because I'm a triple threat for the haters. I'm the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, pro-Israel activist, and a writer of World War II historical thrillers wrapped around the Holocaust. But I will never cower or back down in the face of anti-Semitism. And as I wrote in my personal essay in On Being Jewish Now, I said, on October 6th, I knew what I wanted from life. But after October 7th, I knew what life wanted from me. Loud and proud. This is my mission as a woman, as a Jew, as a mother of 3 young adult daughters, and as an author and a journalist. Thank you for being here. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for reading my books. It is truly an honor and a privilege. And before we open up questions, and you can ask the rabbi, I'm an open book, I wish for all of us, may this new year bring peace, and may our hostages be released and come home alive to their families and loved ones. Am Yisrael Chai. And again, thank you for coming today and allowing me this special opportunity.
Amen va'amen. Thank you, Lisa, especially for that last comment. We've been talking a lot about the idea of a Shana Yoter Tova, a better year than last year, but truly for praying for peace, the return of the hostages, an end to war, certainly, and to really bringing more joy into the world, which you certainly do with all of your writing, even with the context of where those books take place. There's such beauty in the way that you write as well. I'm adding, I added, hopefully the link works. If people have not yet read the book, The Goddess of Warsaw, it's there. I'm also adding a link to Zibby Owens' book that was mentioned as well. And thank you for that. I want to start by saying that you were certainly successful in your goal, at least with me and perhaps others as well, because I did not sleep until I finished reading the book. I could not put it down. And I read it right, as I said, it was just as I was about to go on sabbatical. It was one of the first books I read for the Jewish Book Council this year, but as always, just you brought us all into this storyline that was it. I actually saw the movie in my head. I know it's your previous book that has been optioned, but I can see this one. Certainly, I was imagining, I had a Lauren Bacall in my head, but there are others as well I could see in that role. But really, so your writing is so vivid. It makes it just such a pleasure to read. And I know that others also expressed that they loved this book and couldn't put it down, feeling like we were right there. What was expressed by the chairs of our literary club could not believe how relevant and timely your book is. And you said you started writing it 3 years ago. Was it
Yeah,
during the
yeah,
pandemic?
yes.
Um, Can you tell us a little bit more about the process and how is your process? What is your writing process like generally? You talked a little bit about the research, certainly as a reporter, and having that you have that full 360 sense that you bring to your writing. But tell us a little bit about your writing process and then how it may have been a little bit different with this book if it was.
So, I always say, having been a reporter, a journalist is a blessing and a curse. A curse because a lot of my colleagues um, might say, who are writing historical fiction or historical suspense, might take 5 sources and say, okay, it's a fact. But because of my boot camp journalist training, I need 20 sources until it's on repeat and I know it's a fact. And on top of that, when you're writing about the Holocaust, you have to get it right. There's always going to be someone somewhere who's going to say, my grandmother, my grandfather, or my mother, that's not how it happened. And so I'm very, very aware. My first book, for example, Fugitive Colors, I sent it to the U.S. Holocaust Museum before I would even allow it to be published. So the research process, writing Holocaust-themed historical fiction, is rigorous. For my first book, it was about 4 years before I would allow myself pen to paper. Went all over Europe, did interviews, deep dove into the history of Nazi looted art. By the time I got to Woman on Fire, I had set a very strong basis for Nazi looted art. With The Goddess of Warsaw, I had about 10 months of research at the Illinois Holocaust Museum. And one thing that was really important to me for this book was that I met with a survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto, and there are not many. And, most of the survivors are, the youngest ones are in their late 80s, early 90s. So I did most of my research for this book at the Illinois Holocaust Museum. Everything that you read in this book that feels real is real. And some of the things I embellished or fictionalized, but everything that felt like, wow, did this happen? Did, this happen to these 93 girls? It happened. And I have the note in my hands from the Holocaust Museum that one of the girls left about it. But I needed to meet with a Holocaust survivor. And crazily, it turned out that there was one living 10 minutes away from me in Chicago. So, Rabbi, I'm sure you've had this experience, but when I went to interview her, her name is Estelle Laughlin, and I might tear up because she just passed away a couple weeks ago. And anyway, I walked in, and she was this beautiful with, a shock of white hair and these beautiful twinkling eyes. And I walked in, and it was like I've known her my whole life. It was this meeting of minds, so much so that I had my reporter tape recorded, everything there. I didn't even turn it on. We held hands like this, 2 hands, the entire interview. But I quickly, the minute I got into my car, I wrote down everything that I can remember. But many of the details of the ghetto, how it felt, the scent of it, the fact that there was a convent across from her home. I used that same convent for my character to teach drama. So many ins and outs that Estelle gave me went into the book. But there was one thing that didn't make it into the book, but that I think about all the time, that it was almost the most important tidbit she gave me. And she came from a prominent family. She was 10 years old at the ghetto. Her father was a professor. Her mother, I believe, was a librarian. And she had a sister. And her father, while everyone was starving and diseased, and they were being taken away in the transports on the trains, what did he make her do every single day? He made her take French lessons. French lessons. Who needed French lessons? Well, she told me this young girl who went on to survive 3 concentration camps said that it was the French lessons that helped her survive. Her father wanted to give her an image of her future, that one day she would go to Paris and be able to buy these beautiful dresses and wear them and have a croissant and coffee and cappuccino in Paris. And that was the thing, she told me, that helped her survive. And so it's just those tidbits that affect you as a writer and as a journalist. So I'm all over the place with your answer. My process is I do the research, I spread everything, timelines, note cards, sticky notes, like a mad professor across my kitchen table with the leaves pulled out and my dining room table with the leaves pulled out for about 2 weeks. And I'm mixing and matching.
I
And
feel like you might have shown us that last
I
time.
feel
Am I
it's
right?
on my Instagram. You're totally right.
Yeah.
But it's that everyone know mom's in her crazy mode right now. And so then I push it all aside and then I sit down and I write it. It's all in here. And then I let the characters do the work. Of course, I'm checking facts, but that was my long-winded answer.
No. So I have a follow-up, very connected to some of the other
Yeah.
questions that people have asked, which is you do all of this pre-research, and you talked about the characters, take it from there. So each character has so much detail. Do you develop
Yes.
all of the characters before you begin writing? Do some of them evolve as you're writing? And related to that, Bina Blonsky was so brave. Was there a real Bina? Who, and if so, who was her character based on?
Okay, so to just take it apart a little bit, if I were putting you in my book, I would know every single detail down to what perfume and deodorant you would use. And like, I know facts about my characters that don't get into the book and don't matter, but they're so deep inside me. So I do what my husband laughs and calls my dossier of each, my character, a composite of each character where before I sit down and write them. So whether I'm in a female or a male character or Bina as a young woman or an older woman, I know everything about her as I'm writing her. So it's inside me. I dream these characters. And she was not based on anyone, more a composite of the young women who, as we know, women are the unsung, heroines of war. Many books have come out as recently, but if you look in books of past generations, women were either nurses or arm pieces, but and particularly in the Warsaw Ghetto, women were the main players in the resistance. They were smuggling. They were part of the assassination units. They were laying down bombs. They were couriers, and especially women who looked, blonde and blue-eyed, not Jewish looking. They were sent out to, for intel and various things. A lot of them didn't come back. But these women were extremely brave. And so for me, it was very important that I had a young actress because in effect, that was her greatest weapon. She could act, she could be the part, she could be, many different parts in order to survive.
So what about Stash, the
So
hero?
Stash is
And was he a compilation of people?
Yes.
And
So
how did you write his story?
well, I knew that I wanted to create a young man who was gay. I knew I wanted him to come from royalty, and I wanted to showcase his father, who aligned with the Nazis, was probably one of the higher ups, Poles who worked with the Nazis, and how homosexuals were persecuted along with the Jews. And that has a small role in the book, but it's there. And I also wanted to showcase the many upstanders, non-Jews, who helped Jews and Poles who were being persecuted from an organization that was there and bringing people into the forest, or, helping Jews escape and survive. So he was going to take that role, and he loved Bina at the time before she became Lena, and she accepted him as who he was. But they were like brother and sister. So that was a very special character and relationship that I wanted to create in the book, but not based on anyone particular.
And I know you talked about this in terms of other characters and relationships. One of the follow-up questions was, how did you not cry while writing about his heartbreaking and terrifying experiences? And maybe you did.
Yeah, I was about to say I did cry. There's one, I'm not going to give away the book because there are probably people who are here who haven't read it, but there were, I would say, probably 4 sections of the book that, even reading it 100 times, I felt exactly the same way. It broke me every time writing it. It was the sections that kept me up at night. And it's hard. We have hard stories,
Well,
and
yeah, and
and
so that was one of the additional questions, is what was it like writing about Leni Riefenstahl? I don't know if
yes,
Riefenstahl.
Riefenstahl,
Should
yes.
she have gone to jail? She was documenting these horrors, and the question that follows that is, did that make her a filmmaker or a Nazi?
Well, and made her a Nazi filmmaker who got the pass. In fact, she was courted by Walt Disney, another Nazi sympathizer. And while things were going on in the late 19, maybe it was 1938, she came over and everyone knew what was going on. And she was courted by him in Hollywood. She got the pass. She did not one, but several very, very prominent films that exalted, Nazi Aryan type characters. And so I knew I was going to expose this woman in this book. And no one was
Mm.
going to come after me, because when you're writing truth, truth is truth. And, so that was very important that I showcased those Nazis who escaped justice. And especially in this Operation Paperclip, which I expose in the book, with America's help, gave them identities, brought them over, and that, very prominent Nazis to help our rocketry program in order to compete with the Russians. But we're talking about the guy who invented the gas for the ovens. He came over here. He was given a fake identity, and very, very prominent people in Nassau and other places were Nazis with fake identities. And it was very important to me, through Lena Browning, who is now at the top of her game, to expose and take down various Nazis and bring them to justice.
It is this parallel of the Nazi hunters. There are a number of those types of shows and movies that have been
Yeah,
out, and I think that is the uncovering of that, and really bringing that to light has been somewhat dramatic over the last few
yeah,
years,
I would agree.
recognizing America's role. Um, there are a couple of questions in the chat, one of which was a little bit more about your life as a journalist. You
Okay.
spoke about the hardest thing you had to do as a journalist was to shove a microphone in the face of someone waiting to find out if a loved one had died. And this reader says that she cringes when she sees reporters do that, asking something like, how does it feel to have your relative go through that experience, very graphically sometimes? So why do reporters do that? And if you could share a little bit about your
Yeah.
experience.
Well, first of all, that's an excellent question. I think what it is and what we know is that whenever as a journalist you can humanize news, you humanize, you have the human connection. So it's very powerful if someone is experiencing destruction from a hurricane, rather than just showcase the hurricane and the house destroyed, but when you actually hear it, a first person account from the person whose house it is, and you see them, holding their kids and it's close to them and they've lost everything. It is the human connection that we feel the most, and that creates the real story. So I could tell you that a bus was blown up, but when you see or hear and talk to the aunt or uncle or the sister of someone who either died or was wounded, it's very, very powerful. So, those types of reports are very, very important. And to get the human connection, because that is what, I would say myself and probably everyone here is most drawn to. How does, fill in the blanks affects someone or affects you? And so they're very, very hard stories. You feel like, and you actually learn as time goes on. I mean, I was a young reporter, but how to be sensitive, how, when you're listening to a 60 Minutes interview, or you're listening to a one-on-one interview, the reporter's doing like a build-up to get to the big question that they want to ask, the one that everyone's waiting for. And so that's really what it's about. And you have to learn how to do this with grace and with sensitivity. It took a while to hone that skill, but I feel like I really learned how to do that.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat. I don't know if you saw it. Who is the goddess of the title, Lena or Ricky?
So, you mean
I think
well, obviously the Goddess of Warsaw, without giving it away, is the film. Okay, the film is the Goddess of Warsaw, but I think the beauty of it is the various interpretations. In my mind, the writer mind, it was Bina Blonsky. Lena is the Goddess of Warsaw because she truly showcased survival. She, I don't know if it's a good thing, but revenge was redemption for her. I talked about my grandmother, who was almost the opposite. It was like love was the win. For Bina Blonsky, Lena Browning, revenge and vengeance, getting back the people who took those away from her, was the win. So she, in my mind, was the Goddess of Warsaw, representing all of it, the past and her present and, the future.
Thank you. So last time we were together, you were telling us about, I believe you were telling us about this book, about the Goddess of Warsaw. And so, as always, our final question is, what's next for you?
So every time I say to myself, all right, gotta leave World War II, give it a break. But I'm drawn back in. There's a story that pulls me back in. So the historical background is the Ghost Army. And I don't know if you know what the Ghost Army was, but it was a special unit in America, for the United States, that came to be in 1943, of artists. They brought in all the top artists, and even dress designer Bill Blass was part of this. And they created a fake unit that went to Normandy, 1,100 soldiers, and basically a fake unit, fake tanks, fake everything, all art designed, that looked like 30,000. So the Nazis' focus was on this unit while the real soldiers went in, and it was what really won the war. And so I wanted to bring back this Ghost Army with, kind of Ghost Army 2.0 that they're bringing back that particularly one rogue CIA individual, a woman, is bringing back a ghost army to tackle terrorism, and
Oh,
she
wow.
has, so it's a lot of now, but you're going to get the ghost army. So
Again,
I'm in it.
timely, some history and timely and relevant as always.
Yes, yes.
Excited to we're excited to bring you back to talk about that.
Thank you, thank you.
Lisa, thank you so much for being with us today. And another huge thank you again to Bonnie Youngentab and Tamara Brick, and certainly to the Jewish Book Council for making this partnership possible. If you have not yet read The Goddess of Warsaw, I encourage you to do so. The link is in the chat to purchase it online. You can certainly also find it in our local bookstores as well. And you won't be able to put it down. So
Yeah, and
um,
I was going to say, be sure if you want to know my process or where I'm at, or just kind of follow my journey, you can, at Lisa Barr 18 on Instagram or on Facebook, my author page. I'm very accessible, and that would be great too.
Lisa, thank you so, so much for being with us today.
Yeah,
Always a pleasure.
and thank you for everything you do for authors. We really, really appreciate this space and getting people to know about our books and everything you do. So thank you so much, Rabbi. And, Chag Sameach. And
Hag Sameach and Hag
I'm
Sameach
with
to
you, praying
everyone.
for better days ahead for all, really.
Yes, we all are doing the same, and we know I'm taking us off spotlight so we can all
Oh,
see
yeah.
each other. We know that that even with all the pain and challenge of this year, we also focus on the blessings and this community and the larger community we are blessed to be part of. And Lisa, we're so grateful to you for bringing us together for this opportunity and for also reminding us of the beauty that exists in the world, and also bringing us a little bit more of that history so that we can continue to tell our story. So thank you for being one of the wonderful tellers of that story.
Thank you.
And we wish you a Chag Sameach and a better year, maybe a year that is filled with the blessings for everyone here of good health, certainly of joy, and ultimately of peace, and the end of war in Israel and anywhere else. And may we all come to treasure the opportunities that we have to be together and the blessings, and may others who do not currently experience that come to know that as well.
Thank you.
Lisa, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.